empowers you, the enterprise, to engage your customers globally and more easily. So here's a very high-level solution slide. You have Liferay integration, Lingotek inside of Liferay, and this is the deep integration that XTIVIA has put together for us. What that does is it takes the content and it pushes it up to our cloud-based translation management system via an API set. And the translation management system has what are called translation memories, glossaries, workbenches, translation workflows. We can do professional translation, community translation, and machine translation. I'll get into that into a little bit more detail a little bit later. And once the translation is done, we then publish that back up into the Liferay instance, and you can see where you're not having to copy, paste, and move stuff around as much. So how do we solve this problem? Well, everyone else makes you do it the hard way. These are typical translation agencies. You can see up here on the screen. And they have, in a typical project, you have a project manager and a web admin. And here are the different steps for those folks, identifying content, new pages, editing pages, exporting those, emailing or FTP. And this is the current translation process. As you can see, it's very time-consuming, and there's lots of parts that can be missed or broken or are not put together in a repetitive nature. And so what these translation companies do is only offer one piece of this entire process. So when you work with these other companies, all they have to offer is an offline translation process. Translation's in a black box. You have no visibility into that process unless you contact an account manager. You have no automation of notifications of process management, no integration into the Liferay editorial workflow, no real-time leveraging of translation memories. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute again. And then there's no ability to review or publish the translations as they're completed. You get the stuff back and you import it in now, and then you have someone review it, and if it's wrong, you start the whole process over again. So how hard can it really be? Well, if you have times that by the number of languages that you have, and you times that by the number of pages that you have potentially on your website, and the words per page, and people involved in the process, if you've got different constituents across the globe that you're working with, and steps in your process, this can become a really unwieldy process, and it's very challenging for large organizations. So legacy translation workflows just can't keep up with this kind of new agile way of looking at content. It's too many manual steps, not enough automation. And so what we do is we bring in the different pieces of the translation module, the translation process itself, and we start to solve these by having a deep integration into Liferay. So the processes that are in blue are handled by the Liferay module inside of that, and then you have the other pieces of the puzzle are handled inside of the translation management system. So automation is the key to what we're doing here. We're allowing you to automate as much as possible the translation process so you don't have mistakes, you don't have to re-import stuff. It's all handled via an API and it's automated. So Lingotek offers a couple of different things, and I'll go through this very quickly. We have inside enterprise applications. We have our translation management system. That's where the stuff gets published up to. We also do offer global solutions, which is professional translation. You can use our professional translators or you can use your own. We have clients that do both. And then obviously the translation management system does machine translation and community translation, and we'll describe that just in a little bit more detail here in a second, or in this second. So automated workflows kind of look like this, and we call this a content value index. And so a lot of the professional translation agencies will always push you into professional. That's where they make their money, and that's what they're trying to do is push the per word fee on you. Well, we believe as content, all content is not created equal. Some content may be appropriate to have machine translation and translation memories. Other content might be appropriate to have your community review it. A community could be loosely defined as community members in a support forum. It could be members of a community that you're actually supporting, or it could be community members in your own organization. So maybe it's an in-country marketing manager, perhaps it's a partner that's in a country that wants to help expand into that particular region, and they're willing to help translate some of that content. Also, professional is needed in some cases where you have to have a professional translation review. It's highly technical content, perhaps it's medical in nature, or it has some sort of law piece to it that you need to have, and so professional translation is appropriate in that case. What's great about our translation management system is we can actually mix and match all of these different translation workflows. So we can do a machine translation with a post-community edit, or we can do machine translation and have a professional do a final review on it. All of this does save time and money in terms of the actual cost of translations. That's what we're trying to do, is drive down the per word cost and the project management time around that. Now, we mentioned translation memories earlier in the discussion, and translation memories are previous translated corpus of content that you have you've translated, and we save that inside of our translation management system, and we reuse and recycle that content. So if you have a page that's been professionally translated, or someone that's done the community translation, and we save that memory, when you go to re-change that page, or let's say you only change a sentence or a paragraph on that particular page, you only have to retranslate the one page, or the one sentence, excuse me. And this saves a lot of time and money. Also, if you're talking about content, a lot of content is reused and purposed on a website, and so once you translate it, you can actually reuse it on other pages that will go in and match against those. So translation memories are kind of a key here, and the storage of those are in our cloud-based translation management system, so you can reuse that content very easily. So we have some basic features inside of our stuff. We have the inside modules, and Liferay in this case, they're built specifically for each enterprise application. You don't have to email files, progress, we went through all of that. Our translation management system has project management. We do translation workbench. There's customized workflows, memories. We talked about that. Terminology management and glossaries are specific terms that you want to have translated a specific way. We can enforce and adhere those. That's really good for AdWord purchases and that kind of stuff. All of this capture, reuse, and recycle of content, API integration, etc. Global solution allows you to do content governance. If you need someone to help you actually do the deployment, we can do that as well. Process outsourcing, translation and localization, and validation, verification, all of that kind of stuff. So these are kind of the overarching picture of what Lingotek can help you out from a translation perspective. So I'm going to jump into the actual demo part of the webinar. I'm going to turn it over to Matt Walensky, and he's going to go through some slides and then do a demo, and then I'll hop back on and we'll talk about some specific case studies to get everybody's juices flowing in terms of what there is an opportunity to use this for. So Matt, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to you.
Sounds good. Yeah, we're excited to pair with Lingotek and develop this inside module that integrates the Liferay system with your Lingotek. So let me pull up the slides and I will share my screen with you. And
do you want me to turn the presentation over to you, or do you want me to do this?
I have the presentation now, and I will pull that up next. One sec.
Hey Matt, I think it's still showing on my screen.
We actually, Calvin, we've switched over from yours. We're just waiting for Matt to pop up here.
Oh, okay. Thank you for verifying that.
Sure.
All right. Should pull up and you will, sorry, didn't have the slides quite ready. You should see the slide now. Okay, so we have Liferay Web Content, and that's the biggest thing to talk about with your integration with Liferay and Lingotek. So without going into too many details on Liferay, you build your Liferay websites. Basically, your content comes from Liferay Web Content. These are the articles that you have in Control Panel. They're published onto your pages using Web Content Display or Asset Publisher. And your web content, when you build out your web content, it's important to note that you've got several different options there. Your Liferay Web Content can be built using basic web content structures, or you can build out your content in a number of ways with custom complex structures that build out the content to display and manage in the easiest fashion. Liferay has a lot of support out of the box for workflow, publishing, and full support for localization of your content. And that's last part is the key part with Lingotek. We're going to take our Liferay localization support and tie that seamlessly into the Lingotek translation network. And that makes it easy for you to manage your multilingual site. Digging in a little bit more into the types of web content that Liferay supports, you've got your basic web content. This is the simplest piece of content. It's got one text area HTML element. This is your WYSIWYG editor that everybody's familiar with. It allows you to build your rich HTML content without coding in HTML. This content is always localizable by default. It doesn't mean you have to, but you can support any of the localized elements in there, and your content can show up in any language that Liferay is configured to support. The next type is your complex structures. This is where you're really digging into some of the rich features of Liferay and how you build your content. These rich complex structures contain many different element types. They can contain repeating elements with nested structures that allow you to structure your content in the page any way you need. With these complex structures, you also have the control to determine what's localizable and what isn't. And that's an important thing to note when you're looking at how you tie into Lingotek. You need to actually specify what content you want to be localizable. What we've done is we've built a Liferay integration portlet, which is your inside module to Lingotek. What this does is it takes that Liferay web content article and it packages it as a JSON element and works with the Lingotek API to seamlessly just upload that. When it's packaging your complex structures, we also take into account whether the element's localizable. We take into account what the element type is. So, for example, checkboxes, buttons, document library elements, those aren't really localizable elements that we can upload to Lingotek. What we look at are the text box, the text area, HTML. And this is the content that we're going to upload automatically to Lingotek for you. Next thing to note when you're working with Lingotek is that you've got your language translation targets. So translating content seamlessly in Liferay to Lingotek is actually a multi-step stage that you don't have to worry about. We've taken care of it. First part is the upload of the document, which is your web content article. We're going to package that up for you as a JSON object. We're going to work with the API and we will upload that content for you. The next piece is to submit the request of the language translation target. And that's where you say, for this article, I want to see it in Spanish, German, Dutch, Polish. And we'll make the language translation requests for each of those targets. Lingotek will process that separately in the workflow stream. So when we upload a document, we said, let's have this in 5 different languages. As soon as each of those languages are ready, we'll be able to get that back from Lingotek and we won't have to wait for all of it. Downloading the translations. This is the key part as well. I mean, we can upload everything we want, but unless we're getting it back, unless we're applying it in our site so we can see it and use it, it's all for naught. So the basic 2 ways what we've set up is we've got an automated Liferay Lingotek callback service. This is actually really crucial, and it's something that not all translation providers will allow you to do. What we've done is we've exposed a JSON RESTful service within Liferay that Lingotek can call as soon as a document, and in our case it's a web content article, is completed. So we'll get the call back to say this document's completed for this language. And our inside module will then update the status of that. It will go to Lingotek's API, pull down the latest content, and apply that into Liferay, which can either go live immediately or can go through any workflow you've set up for your web content. Second part is the manual request, because we all know that nothing's foolproof. There could be outages. Anything can happen. So we're going to give you a way, go into control panel to say, you know what, I want to re-upload content. I want to specifically request an additional language, or I want to re-download all languages from Lingotek. I think what I've got is stale. I want to push it up. I want to pull it back down. And then you can do that manually. And that's an optional thing, but when you push it through Lingotek's workflow and the automatic callback service is rolling, you don't have to worry about any of that. It just comes back automatically. The next thing to talk about is our Lingotek Translate Now feature. What we've done, and I will demo this as well in a minute, but we've added a support into the website when you're looking at the web content display portlet. When you're looking at the content in your site in context, you can actually click and it'll go right to Lingotek, deep link into their workbench, and it'll allow you to fine-tune that content, save it, and it'll come back automatically and get applied. And this saves a lot of time because it gives you the ability to manage your content in context with your site. So if things don't look right or the alignment's not right, you can fix that, because everybody knows that when you translate things to different languages, the word sizes and everything doesn't always match up exactly. And in conclusion on this, before we go to the demo, just to hit a couple of bullet points, we've put in this seamless integration between Liferay and Lingotek. Only the localized content of the text nature is going to be uploaded. That doesn't preclude you from localizing other elements in Liferay and managing that. The next thing we've got is that the language translations we downloaded, we create new versions of the articles. This is actually an option you can turn on and off with the property files, but for versioning, as we download and make changes to your CMS content, we're going to increment the versions so that you can always roll back and fall back to any of the older versions that you want. The Liferay callback service enables an automated content to be applied automatically, and you've got some manual controls in control panel to upload and download content. So next, let's actually take a quick look at the demo, and we will look at first our Liferay control panel. So you should be seeing the Liferay Web Content control panel, and this is the demo side. We don't have a whole lot of content, but we wanted to give you an idea of what we're looking at. So we will take a quick look at my test complex article, where we've got a variety of languages set up. We've got some localized content for an image. We've got localized content for a description. The name is not localizable, title, a few other elements in here. And we're looking at this type of content, and we want to say we made some changes and we want to force an upload to Lingotek. So we will force the upload to Lingotek, at which point it comes back and publishes the document. It gives us a quick screen to say, do you want to add any new localized target locales? Again, in this version for 6.1, we've got to type in the name of the target locale. We've also got a version we're pulling up that's going to give pop-downs and pickers as well. But say we want to put in Italian. We want to upload that to Lingotek. What that's going to do is that basically says, I'm going to create the translation target. I'm going to dig in. I'm going to go directly into Lingotek, deep link into their workbench, and you can see that our machine translation is done, and we're looking at the content in context. We can see our title, we can see our description, we can see our second title, and these are the elements of your complex structure you're looking at. But we also note that the name is not there, and the name's not there because we didn't localize that. So we can go in here, we can look at the machine translation, we can say, you know what, I'm going to change this because I speak Italian and I want to make fine tunes to that. I can save that. I can go back directly into Liferay, and I can look at my contact. Once it's completed, it will apply automatically. I can also say, you know what, I'm going to force another download. Why not? And then go back into my article and see that the Italian is now here and it's been translated. It has my latest change. I can see the name's not there because I didn't localize that element, and I can manage what my content is in Flow. The next part is actually kind of a really cool feature. It ties into the Translate Now feature. So I'm logged in as another user. I'm working through the site. I'm viewing it in English, and I want to switch over to German. So now I can see that the content of the site's changed. I've got German here. I now have a Translate Now icon, and this is the Lingotek Translate Now feature. It allows you to look at the site in context. I can see, you know what, this piece of content's not in German yet, but I want to do that in German. So if I click that, it'll dig me deep link right into that Lingotek workbench. I can get my machine translation done, and I can look at each of the different elements and say, you know, that looks good. I'm going to move on. Why are my initials on this article? So I'm going to take that out, save that, move on, and step through each of the different pieces and add a note that says demo. And then I can, once I've completed going through this, I'll save it and close it. I'm back at Liferay, but I haven't reloaded the page yet. So let's just reload the page, and we can see immediately it popped. It went through its workflow. It hit that callback service. It applied and pushed that content live, and I can see everything that I've done, even with my demo. So this kind of ties into that just seamless interaction between Lingotek and Liferay, and we can basically tie it into whatever workflow is needed. In this case, we're doing a live demo. We're pushing it live right away, but we can actually enable that to be fit with whatever you've got in your environment. So that's the demo that we're looking at. I think I can pass it back to Calvin to look at any case studies that we might have.
Thanks, Matt. That was fantastic. Gave me goosebumps. I like to see that. So another couple of things to note on that as well is any kind of bolds or italics, or if you have any inline images, all of that does get replaced, and so you don't have to go in and make those other edits as well too. So if you look at the our workflow steps, if I were to go up a few slides, and it would show having to copy and paste stuff back into Liferay, you no longer have to do that. So he showed a couple of really great instances where we were machine translating content on the fly. So he's picking a new language, and Italian's the case, and it sends it up, does the call on it, and then when it's done, it comes back, replaces that content. The second one is where we talk about community translation, where you can allow a user to go in and edit the page or request for a translation. And so I'm going to go into a case study actually that talks a lot about that and how that works. And just are you guys able to hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
See my screen? Okay, great. Anyway, so Intel has a project called Tizen. The Tizen initiative is a software package for different phones, iPads, and that kind of stuff. And Intel was sponsoring this, and they're using us to do localization for their Tizen initiative into 6 languages. Tizen is an open source project, and it's based on a platform for mobile operators, device manufacturers, and smartphones, tablets, netbooks, etc. And what they wanted to do is have this the Tizen open source project be able to be translated by their community members. And so what they do is they have exactly that use case where the page has been pre-translated or it hasn't been, and then a member goes in and clicks on that request little icon, and the workbench comes in, they make the translation, and when it's done, it then comes back and replaces that. As you can see, if you can do machine translation and post-community edit or post-community requests, you actually save a lot of money because you're not professionally translating. And everyone on the site knows that anything that's in there that's being translated is done by machine translation. Machine translation can be around 80% accurate, but it's not always 100%. And so someone that's on that page and part of that community can actually help fix that page. And then that page, once it's been post-edited by a human, then becomes part of the translation memory that we talked about before. So, you know, for their challenges, everything was a manual process and it wasn't synchronized. So they were literally having to go into every page and translate those pages. And they had no way of capturing the translations or requesting or having their community members help out. They also Intel has a very large existing translation asset, and they were able to import that into our translation management system and use that. So what the results were is they got a 55% reduction in translation turnaround time and 45% reduction of translation costs, and they were able to fully automate with real-time project oversight. So very interesting case study and fits very well into what Matt was showing there kind of at the end where you can click on that, you know, the deep link and go in and help do the translation right from in Liferay. The second case study I'm going to go through is a company called HGST. They're a Western digital company. They do hard drives. HGST wanted to launch a worldwide website, localization project, and they wanted to do that into 8 languages and room to scale. If you're not familiar with HGST, they have a reputation for reliable portfolio of different types of hard drives, platter disks, and also the solid-state drives that a lot of people are talking about. They protect a lot of the world's data. I imagine most people that are on this call probably have a Western digital drive or an HGST drive probably in their computer. So they're very pervasive and they're across the entire world. Their challenge was that they had hundreds of website changes every month, and they couldn't keep track of it. If you looked at how they were tracking it, it was embarrassing to say the least. They had everything in an Excel spreadsheet, and every time a page changed, and then into their 8 languages, they would have to keep track of the change and then what was changed on that page. They'd have to copy and paste that, send it to their language service provider, get it back, and then someone would have to re-import it. You can see how slow, costly, and error-prone that is. As Matt showed you, just click of a button that sends it up to our system, does the translation, and sends it back. All of the bolds, italics, all of that stuff is kept in place, and you just save all of those steps in the process. It can literally take weeks down to minutes in some cases of translating. So their ROI in the first 3 months of use, or they had an ROI in the first 3 months of use, and their content changes were automatically identified. They have them so they automatically go through the workflow. As Matt showed, you can set it up to be automatic, or you can do it manually, either or. Some folks like to just have it happen, and some people like to keep a little bit closer eye on that, and certainly you can set it up either way. And then you obviously have a full-time or fully automated with real-time project oversight. So if something gets stuck or if something's taking too long to get translated on the professional side, or you need to have someone help you out on a particular page, you know which pages have changes and which ones are out of sync, so to speak. So all of that is kept track of in the system as well. My last case study is an interesting one. It's a company called CA Technologies, and they have 24,000 documents that they manage across 300 different products, and in 19 languages. And so as you can see, 24,000 times 19 is a lot. And so for them to keep track of all of this stuff was very challenging. So they used an old workflow and a new workflow where they have the ability to keep all of this content in sync. They had a 55% faster turnaround. Their content was able to be indexed by Google because it wasn't being stored somewhere else, and it was SEO friendly for each of the different languages. Well, I hope that gives you at least a few different ideas on how this works. I'm going to turn it over to the last slide. I know we're going to turn some time over to some Q&A if you guys have any questions. But here's the contact information for both companies here. If you have any questions, feel free to hit any of this stuff. I'll leave it up while we're answering those questions. But if you need to contact us, if you'd like to have a demo, we'd certainly like to get on the phone and show you something, a deeper integration. We can get into some more workbench stuff if that's of interest to you, but certainly reach out to us and let us know what you think, and we can certainly help you out.
All right, Calvin, good job. Good thing you guys tag teamed that. You guys covered a lot of ground in about 35 minutes, so thank you for that. And fortunately now we've got a good chunk of time here to address some questions. We have a couple that have come in, and this would be a good time to invite the attendees. If you've got more questions, go ahead and send those in now, and we'll just start chipping away at those, and then we'll chip away at these first. And then if there's anything else that comes up, Matt and Calvin, that you want to throw in, we should have plenty of time to kind of dialogue about this. So let me go to the first question here. Is it possible to provide a Lingotek portlet so during the translation, the user does not need to jump from Liferay to Lingotek website and jump back again?
I'll let Matt answer that. I think he's probably closer to that on the integration side.
Yes, I mean, we can set it up that way. One of the reasons why we did jump into the Lingotek was primarily if it was in the scenario that you wanted to make changes beyond what machine translation does out of the box. But that step can definitely be skipped if you just wanted to push it up and let it automatically come back and not deal with looking at the workbench at all.
Yeah, certainly that's true. Yep.
Great. And Omar, if you have any follow-up to that. Yep. Okay, good. Looks like we answered Omar's question. A couple of the obvious questions that I'm sure you get quite a bit. How many languages can this support?
Yeah, out of the box, Lingotek can support any language that is what's called UTF compliant. So if it's machine language capable, it certainly can be handled very easily via that. So if it can be what's called UTF-8 compliant, we can support it. If you're talking about machine translation specifically, it depends on the engine that we hook to, and I don't think I mentioned this earlier, but we actually hook into about 10 different machine translation engines, and you would ask, why would we want to do that? Certainly, some engines are better than other engines, some have more languages, and some are very specific for a type of content. And so we will, as a partner of whoever, we can recommend the best engine to use. Now, 2 or 3 of those are free to use on our system. Microsoft and Microsoft Bing Translation and Google Translator, those are both enterprise-grade versions of those, are free to use through our system. I think there's one other one, and then there's some that are paid. Certainly, you have to get a validated key from those folks to use those, but I would recommend those only in specific kind of user or use cases. I don't, Matt, is there a limit in Liferay in terms of what Liferay does support? I would imagine probably not, but I don't know the answer to that question.
In all my years of experience, I haven't found a language that they didn't support.
Yeah, that's typically what it is. If it's machine supportable, you can support it.
You could even go so far as to separate out English US to English Great Britain.
Yep. Correct.
Don't know you need machine translation for that one, though.
No, machine does that as well too. There's certainly there's a difference between Portuguese in Brazil and Portuguese in Portugal. Those actually do come up differently in the machine translation engine, so it does depend on the language and the locale in some cases.
Okay, great. We have a question about the time of integration, but can you also just touch on the process, what the integration process looks like?
I could start to talk about the integration with the Lingotek integration portlet. So we're looking at less than a week to get up and running on this. Mainly that ties into how much workflow you want to tie into the process, how much is going to be manual. There's a lot of fine-tuning there that can happen just to make sure that it fits exactly with the way your business runs. And then we've got little things in there like making sure that your character sets are UTF-8 in the database and so forth, and fine-tuning that to make sure that the API integration is hooked up correctly. But all in all, it should be less than a week.
And from our side, we certainly fit in within that time frame as well.
Okay, great. I don't remember if you covered this specifically or not, but somebody asked if they make or add changes to a website, does it get sent back for translation automatically?
Certainly, you can set it up to be automatic, or you can do manual. I think Matt touched on that a little bit. And then whatever is the differences only gets translated. So say you have a page that has 3 paragraphs, and the middle paragraph is the only one that changes, or particularly maybe one sentence or segment gets changed. When that does get sent back up to Lingotek to get translated, we only translate the differences. So based on the translation memory, we'll actually keep track of those changes for you, so you actually don't have to keep track of them. So I go in and make a change, and I say, okay, resubmit this, or it's automatically submitted for translation. And when it's done, you can have it automatically returned back, or you can, again, do that manually. You can set that up based on your processes. But that's what's kind of the beautiful thing about it, is you don't have to keep track of that in those spreadsheets and keep track of, where is this in the process, and who do I need to send this to next, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and to expand on that just a little bit, Liferay has a full workflow engine built into it that you can tie directly into your content changes, whether you want them to be automatically uploaded or if you want to do that manual step. In the demo, we kind of went back to a manual process because I wanted to show the manual process, but it doesn't have to be that way. We can tie into your existing workflow, and we can go so far as to, when the content is completed in Lingotek and comes back to Liferay through our callback service, we can create drafts, or we can publish the version to your staging site instead of your live site and fit it into the workflow that you use for your site.
Yeah, that's a great point. That makes it super flexible, so you're not going towards our workflow. We're just interjecting into your workflow. However you do your content governance and how you're doing your approvals and all of that.
Okay. We've still got a couple questions coming in. I'm curious though, if somebody sent in a question to us in Chinese today, have you guys learned enough about Chinese you could just translate it on the fly?
Do I know Chinese? I'm sorry, I don't. I would have to post it into my system and look.
This sounds good. Somebody has a question about licensing, and in particular, if they have a large community. I'll read the question. How does your licensing model work, especially if I'm using a large community to translate?
I would have to ask Matt the specifics, but typically I think you can set up different users to have different profiles, and one of the profile pieces is going to allow them to be a translator or not. And so not everybody that logs in the community would have that particular button, so to speak, and you can turn that off based on a role. So you could either send out a thing and say join our translation club, and whoever signs up, give them the access or permission to that, and you can kind of vet them a little bit that way. Or you could certainly open it up to everyone if you want. Typically, if it's a community that people are logging into and you have a relationship with, they're not going to go in and try to kind of mess with the content, so to speak. But you would just have to fill that out with your community and see what you felt comfortable doing.
I mean, everything in Liferay is role-based, so whether you have access to control panels role-based, whether you have access to upload or downloads role-based, whether you have access to the Translate Now features role-based. I'm thinking this question may be more into the licensing costs.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. On our side, it doesn't matter how many people you have. We base our pricing on language. So I don't know what the Liferay. Okay. You'd have to ask. I'm not familiar with the Liferay licensing on how it affects the licenses for those. So I'd let Matt.
No, Liferay license. I mean, it's an enterprise license. Doesn't matter how many users you have, how many languages you have. You're paying for the software.
Gotcha. Okay. So we're certainly we're language based, and so you pay per language, and so the community is unlimited on top of that.
Okay, great. Got two more questions, and we've got them kind of trickling in here, but does the Lingotek integration handle Liferay Web Content that uses Liferay Web Content structures?
Yes, and that was one of the things I talked about with the complex structures. The way it works is it will take the structured element and it will iterate through every element in the structure, including your nested and repeating elements. And it will, for each of the elements it crawls through, it's going to pick out to see if it's localizable, to see if its type is correct, if it's a text area, a text box, and it will package that object up to upload into Lingotek with those key value pairs so that it can keep track of where that structured element and where the content resides. And one of the unique pieces of it is the way we're able to pick that apart and apply everything back seamlessly right into your complex structure. And it'll handle any amount of nested or repeating elements.
Great.
Yeah, what Matt said.
Yeah. And if those of you who are asking questions, if you have any follow-ups to those, I think these guys are doing a great job hitting the answers. But if you have any follow-ups, go ahead and you can submit those through the Q&A window. One more that we have, and then I want to make sure we've covered them all so far. Is this available for Liferay 6.1 and 6.2?
Current version we have out is on 6.1 for the customer base we have. As the port to 6.2 is not going to be a big deal. Most of the changes there will be in your the hook, where we're overriding features in how the Translate Now button is or how the actions are in Control Panel, because those screens have all changed in 6.2. But the core feature is should be agnostic, and we've done little bits of testing on 6.2, but we haven't had a client roll out with it on 6.2 yet.
Okay, great. And I'm looking through my questions here. I think we've hit all of them. As you guys have been listening to the questions come in, Matt or Calvin, any other things that have come to mind that you want to touch on, or anything? I know we can't speak specifically about current projects going on, at least not by the name of our clients, but any additional insights just as we wrap things up here?
Yeah, one of the things I just wanted to add, and I know Calvin had touched on this as well, is that to keep in mind that even in some of the demos we did where we're looking at straight text, we're actually packaging and uploading complete HTML, and Lingotek is able to pick through the HTML, and without messing up the formatting, we can still get our translated content and get back the HTML that we're going to apply into Liferay, where the only real changes that have happened are the actual text-based in there. So even if you've got your CSS and you've got JavaScript in there, and if you're putting those into your web content article, the upload process and download process doesn't mess that up for you.
Yeah, that's a great point, and that's something that does save a lot of time and a lot of effort for folks. Again, in the translation process, it really falls on the project manager and typically a localization person or a localization manager. In the old world, they have to copy and paste, keep track of this in spreadsheets. It's very challenging. It's very difficult. These guys have better use of their time than doing that. You know, the combination of the Portlet and Lingotek's translation management system really does save a lot of time and energy from that perspective, and it is pretty amazing. We'd love, if anybody's on the call would like to have an in-person demo, we would certainly like to set that up for you and dive deeper into your specific use case. I know there's always things that change between different sites, but certainly we can work around that and make it work for you, certainly.
Great, sounds good. We'll try and stall here as we wrap up and see if anybody wants to throw in any last-minute questions. But in terms of a demo, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think probably what we want to do is have those go through NIR Matt or Calvin, do you have any, does that seem right that up on the screen we've got Nir's contact info? Should we direct those to him?
Certainly, and if you either or, you can go to our site and we have a demo. You know, where you fill out a form and request a demo. Certainly, Nir can contact them. Either way, we'll get in contact with you. So.
Okay, great. So, yeah, fortunately, the contact information has been up here as we've been doing the Q&A. So hopefully, everybody's had a chance to jot that down. Yeah. I know our team would be glad to. Either teams from Lingotek or XTIVIA would be glad to answer any additional questions if you want to follow up after the webinar today. And Matt and Calvin, unless you have anything else you want to offer, we'll go ahead and wrap this up. We got to give people an extra 10 minutes of their day back.
Perfect. Well, I appreciate everybody's time today, and look forward to meeting some of you folks on a demo, perhaps.
Likewise, it's been very exciting just going through this. I think the integration between the two systems is extremely useful. It solves a lot of the problems that we've had in the past with manually doing your translation, and it's a very exciting thing. So thank you very much for all of your time. I appreciate it.
Matt and Calvin, thank you.